Your host, Joe Carter. We are super excited that you took time out of your very busy schedule so that we can go beyond the hype and the headlines to spotlight the systems that are out there actually scaling. As you know, I've said in every seat, franchisee, franchisor, private equity, built, exited multiple companies at 7 to 14 times EBITDA. And all of that, I've learned that buyers do not pay for hustle, they pay for systems. And today's guest gets that at an empire building level. Adam Povlitz is the CEO of Anago Cleaning Systems, which is not just another janitorial brand. This is $100 billion industry platform that is turning executive leaders into franchise empires through a master model that most people overlook. So let's unpack how Adam and his team are guiding a recession-resistant legacy brand and get into its growth chapter. So Adam, first and foremost, thank you for joining us. We sincerely appreciate you being on.
Hey Joe, thanks for having me.
Of course. So I know Anago started with your father, but it's now grown into a powerhouse, right? So I would love to hear from you how that vision has evolved since, what was it, the late 80s when you guys started?
Yeah, so my dad founded the business in 1989. And frankly, his background was traditional commercial cleaning. So like hiring his own crews and getting the buildings cleaned himself. And it was, we had moved to Florida at the time, and my grandmother was there and he said, she wanted to get to the sunshine from Michigan. And long story short, he worked for what we would call a competitor for maybe 3 months and said, you know what, I think I could do this whole franchising thing a little bit better. And it wasn't long after before Anago was started. And so, I think it started frankly, it started as an income generation vehicle. It started as his, a business to put food on the table. Now, I mean, we cover all of North America, and our whole objective is about empowering people through business ownership. So it's grown from essentially like a garage startup to something that spans most of the continent here. We're really excited about all that growth.
Well, congrats on the growth. And I know you all are like one of the leading franchisor, out there. You're number 44 entrepreneur, and you're really very strong in the master franchise model. What have you seen within that model that maybe some others have missed?
So I think that one of the coolest things about the master franchise model, and maybe I'll break this down for your listeners real quick, so because it's not that common. Most franchises that people are familiar with are going to be what we would call a two-tier franchise model. So, you have your McDonald's corporate offices and then the folks who own the restaurants. Ours is a three-tier franchise model. So we have the corporate office, we have what we call a master franchisee, and then they're selling what we call a unit or janitorial franchisee. And so the way we feel like this is extremely beneficial is it allows everyone to kind of focus on their core competency. So an easy example, right, is someone tells you, Joe, you're a great cook, you should start a restaurant. But what you and I know is that there's a massive difference between being a good cook and properly managing a restaurant, right? I mean, there's staffing, marketing, spoilage, inventory turnover. It's not just cooking. And so when we like to think of our master and unit model, we think of it in the same vein, right? You have the people who clean the business, but the quote unquote cleaning, the industry of the cleaning business is significantly more complicated than is just the cleaning of office buildings itself. So what it does is it allows people with a white collar background, kind of sales, marketing, and management roles to be able to repurpose their executive level skill set and focus on building a business, a scalable, multi-million dollar, size business. And on the same token, it allows someone who's just, kind of getting their feet wet into entrepreneurship to open a small cleaning business. They can start it with minimal capital up front. And they can start, it can be like a side hustle, keep their day job if they want, make some extra dough after hours and just see where it goes. I mean, it can scale to, exponentially larger than that, but it essentially allows for kind of entrepreneurs at all levels to get into the business that they feel is most suited or appropriate for their skill set.
I love that. Thank you for breaking that down. That was substantially more data than I was anticipating, but I loved every piece of it. It's like making me salivate in my mouth. Last I looked, the number's probably grown since then, but you guys are north of 1,700 franchisees, and it's continuing to grow. But obviously you've been around for more than, 3 decades now, so I'm sure at least in the early stages there may have been some inefficiencies that were in there that you guys have worked on and obviously fixed up until this point. So what were some of those things, and what did you systemize in order to be able to fix them to get to this level of growth?
So actually, yeah, it's over 1,800 now. So we've grown already since you got your info. But I think there was a lot of inefficiencies in the early days, particularly with the master franchise model. I love my dad, but my dad was your classic serial entrepreneur, and so when he set up Anago, he would sell someone a master franchise, and it was very much a crash course training, and then slap a logo on it and you're Anago too. And that's sort of what it was in the early days, I think, of any franchise, right? But ultimately, I think we got to a place where we were able to, really create a standardized training and orientation program. And I think you can hear my lawn guy right now. Sorry, everyone. If I'm on any kind of video call, that's when he decides it's the perfect time to show up. But
don't worry, mine will show up in a minute, so we're good.
Yeah, exactly. But I think making sure we standardize the onboarding, standardize the initial training, and then what we really focused on next was centralizing the technology. So we have a platform that we use called CleanCom now, where if you have any kind of issue with your cleaning service, what do most people out there in the world do, right? You go, oh no, we have an issue with the cleaning. Who cleans this place is usually the first question. And then it turns into, okay, well, let's find the contact. Is there a phone number for them? Sometimes they have like a book or something, like a binder where you can leave notes. Then the question turns into is, hey, do you speak Spanish, Portuguese? Do you speak, in some places, Vietnamese, Mandarin? Oh, no, you don't? Okay, I got to find someone who speaks the language of the person who cleans it. And then you leave a note and you just kind of cross your fingers and hope that somebody actually does what you left the note for. How ridiculous. So we said, what if we could centralize the tech on all of this with CleanCom? Now, if you have an issue with one of our cleaning services, you take out your phone, you take a picture of it, you can mark what room the issue's in. You type it in whatever language you speak. It has built-in Google Translate, so they can respond in whatever language they speak, and everyone can understand each other. And there's no exchange of cell phone numbers or anything like that. It's totally private communication, and you have a 2-hour response guarantee to make sure you're going to get responded to when anything goes wrong, God forbid, very quickly. And then just to one-up it one more time, we've with everything that we've technologically been focused on lately, we took it to another level and are working on putting preventive analytics in it. Meaning, like, if say someone at your the franchisee servicing your office has gets some issue reported in the bathrooms, and then there's some other client that he's servicing and they report an issue in the bathrooms, we're getting notified in real time of where they're having repeat issues. So then the master franchisee in that area can say, hey man, let's come in and have a retraining on how to properly do restroom cleaning and disinfection, so that you don't get any more complaints, and we can make sure you're keeping all your accounts happy.
All right, you are talking my language now. We're getting into analytics stuff. That's literally what my MBA is in, so we could probably go for hours about analytics, but I know there's a lot to your model that I want to make sure that we get to. But one question that I've been asked previously is, like, how, if any, did like the whole COVID thing impact the commercial cleaning business? Did it positively impact it, negatively impact it? So what have you seen from a shift perspective post-COVID?
So, I think there's a lot of things going on. COVID for the cleaning industry was very good. I think going into, obviously worldwide, craziness and chaos, and but for the industry specifically, it was very beneficial. We all were scrambling. I think we learned sourced, chemicals and products, and became disinfection experts with quite literally written operating manuals on proper disinfection techniques, and had to do it in 6 weeks. That was exciting. Those are some exciting 12-hour days.
That's
But
what we get.
but coming out of that, I think what happened is, frankly, I think people, I think they think of their cleaning of their offices sort of historically as sort of a budget item to minimize. And during COVID, it was a huge priority to have your office, cleaned and disinfected regularly. And then coming out of COVID, you know, obviously inflation got to everybody. We're seeing, customers, we're seeing, chemicals and equipment on our side getting more expensive. The fight for 15 has now become more like the fight for 20. And so our costs are going up, which of course then in turn, causes raises to, customer pricing. And I think people right now are in this sort of, inflated out is how I would probably describe it. And so what we're seeing is, a little bit of a slowdown that's just now starting to come out. There was a speed up during COVID. Everything was accelerating. Clients were, sales were coming rapidly. I think probably 23, 24, end of 23, 24, some of 25, there was a little bit of a slowdown where people were inflated out, and they said, you know what, the cleaning company I have isn't the best, but every time I go to market, frankly, everyone's just, 10, 20% more expensive. So I'm not happy, but I'm going to stick with cheap. And now I think where the chemical and labor side is starting to catch up, right? And so now the customers that were getting those cheap contracts, now that those cleaning companies are having to go back to those same customers and say, hey man, I'd love to keep this rate for you, but the minimum wage just went to $16.50 in our state, and so I have to pay our people more to keep your building clean. And so what we'll see is, I think you're going to see a really rapid acceleration in 2026 of contract sales going way up. Some companies will be the beneficiary of that. Some companies will obviously be on the losing end of that stick. But it's just playing that strategy right, I think, is where kind of everything shakes out over the next post COVID into, let's call it 26, 27.
I love that. And the fact that you hit on some more numbers just really makes me want to dive in even further. Again, like analytics is my jam. So if it's cool, I would love to pivot over to like kind of some unit economics and stuff like that. So obviously I was off on the count there. It's 1,800 now. So apologies that I threw out the wrong term there momentarily. So hopefully this one's right. Average master franchisee with you does north of 2.7 million in annual sales, or at least that's the data that I have. I'm good on that one. Hallelujah.
Keep going up.
Okay.
No, keep going up.
Oh, it's going up.
Keep going
I thought
up.
it was a thumbs up.
Oh yeah. No, keep going up. Average master franchise with us that's open a year or more does 3.3 million in annual sales.
That's amazing. Like that obviously is exceptionally high performing when you compare it to the industry, right? So without having to sign an NDA or anything, what can you tell us about what a high performing territory looks like in terms of return on investment, timeline to break even, things like that?
So I think, a top performers can see a break even in, I would say 18 months. I would say a meaningful ROI in more like 24. It really comes down to the owner personality and how fast they capitalize on the potential in their market. The model is set up where you can definitely do it as, I don't want to say start small, but start a little bit more conservative and kind of get into a territory and manage the sales yourself, bring on minimal staff, and keep your overhead really low. On the flip side, right, depending on what market you're in, if we as an example, we just sold the St. Louis, Missouri market. That's a massive market. I'm not going to tell these folks, hey, yeah, get in, get your feet wet, take your time. It's going to be very much like, hey, let's get in, and within 6 months, you need to have a couple of salespeople. You need to really be drumming up more appointments, more leads. Spend the money on your website, PPC, SEO. Social media. It's all we have kind of playbooks that we implement with all the markets that help so they know what vendor to go to and what budgets that we recommend and all that sort of stuff, so that it's not just do your best like back in the day, right? Slap a logo on it. But in those markets, it's going to ultimately be driven by, do they invest at the level we recommend? And then frankly, are they hungry, right? At the end of the day, the master franchise model is not at least in our brand, is not if you build it, they will come. It's very much like every day you got to get up, be hungry. What can we do to drive this further, faster, higher? And then when you go to bed, you wake up the next day and go, okay, now what can we do again? What can we do today?
I love that. I love that. And I know earlier you referenced a lot around some of the tech efficiencies that you've been able to close, and the new technology model that you're leveraging and using to not only drive kind of customer client experience, but also be able to drive a higher return. How much of your master model is powered by that proprietary tech?
Just about all of it. So when I got to Anago, I was I didn't get to Anago until 2009. By then we were on some proprietary software for lead management, for billing, and we further developed. I actually helped spearhead the development of a bidding, proposal, and inspection software that we use internally. And after spending way more money than I'd like to admit on developing that, it's funny, I said to myself, I'm like, I do not want to buy or build software again. We partnered with a firm because we're actually doing a major upgrade of our CRM. And we got so deep in with them that it's basically custom software at this point. And so I said, okay, wait a minute, I just did it again. And so we're leaning toward the, okay, maybe we need to buy this at some future point. But one thing that we thought about in our industry, right? It's a low margin industry, so the game to play is high sales volume, and constantly being in the sales space, and then obviously minimizing overhead and any other kind of costs is what the profit model is essentially. And so our new CRM is going to be we actually have a few markets in beta right now, and it's going to be officially launching in 2026. But it's set up where from lead into an actual appointment, proposal is created, any kind of follow-up, signed contract, and then same thing down the franchise pipeline, right? So unit franchise potential person is disclosed with an FDD, they're a lead, they get disclosed, they ultimately buy, go through any kind of things they need to fill out. Ultimately, the client and franchisee are connected, right? So you say, okay, this is a client for this particular franchisee who lives in this part of town. The client is billed, money is collected, and money is remitted, the balance is remitted to the unit franchisee who cleaned it. All of that, zero double entry, zero paper created unless requested by customer.
That's fantastic, and a shift towards not only technology improvement, but you're helping the environment too. So kudos there on that. I know many of the franchise brands that I talk to don't have necessarily that master franchise model mindset like you all do, and so therefore there might be some unknowns when somebody's exploring what does that mean. So what are the shifts that kind of have to happen in that master's mindset, whether when you're trying to transition from a serial entrepreneur, like you said your father was in the past, to more of an empire builder?
So I think it's a combination of things, right? It's so you want someone who's very entrepreneurial, but at the end of the day, it needs to be someone who's willing and capable of following systems and ultimately thinking kind of tying those together and still being able to think big, right? I feel like that, the classic entrepreneur, like I was calling my dad earlier, he's someone that, you can't tie him into a system. I got an idea and I want to try it. And it's a phenomenal mindset to be in, and it's extremely powerful. If that's you, go start your own business. Don't buy a franchise. If you're someone who has the entrepreneurial spark and says, I know I need to do my own thing. I'm tired of making money for somebody else. But at the end of the day, I'm not an expert in restaurants or fitness or cleaning or whatever it might be. This is, that's where the kind of the mind shift happens, where it's like, okay, I want to grow something. I want to grow something maybe you want to grow something small. That's fine. We have that as an opportunity. Maybe you want to, you go, I got some bills to pay. I need to grow something really big. We have that opportunity as well. But ultimately, it's something where it's just learning our lingo, right? Because at the end of the day, it's sales. Every business is sales, and it's what avenue do you use to sell? Do you have a storefront that sells? Do you run a lot of commercials that sell, or social media ads? Or in our case, it's outbound B2B. It's that hunter mentality. I always joke, and I use there's an old African proverb that said every morning the lion wakes up and has to outrun the slowest gazelle or he starves, and the gazelle wakes up and has to outrun the fastest lion or he gets eaten. But everybody wakes up running. And I liken that to this business model. If you're someone who's a go-getter type, and you gotta get creative, and you want to get going and excited, this can work for you. And that's frankly, that's the real mentality that has to occur more so than anything else. And then it's also a mentality shift of, I'm going to, I would say I'm very cognizant when I'm meeting with potential territory owners to say, listen, if you just want to get into this and do some sales, I don't want to sell this to you, because I don't want to sell you a job. I want to sell you a business. So if you want to do the sales for, a few months by yourself or something like that, get your feet wet, get used to it, learn the system, let's do it. You should. I quite literally cleaned buildings and telemarketed and everything at the beginning of my career at Anago. You have to know everything. But at the same time, if you're looking at it as I want to buy myself a sales job, don't do this. If you're going, I want to come in and I want to buy a business that happens to be in cleaning, that is focused on sales, and I'm going to, bring up a team and build them up and help them grow. And ultimately that's how I'm going to build my territory. That's the real shift that goes from kind of solo operator to empire builder. You're not the only person that should be working.
Right. Very true. And I'm going to steal that analogy that everybody wakes up running. That's like gold right there. You touched on a couple of things that really makes me think franchise fit. Not everybody is fit for every brand, right? Some people want a more hands-on type role. Some people want more sales. Some people want to be empire builders. But what are some of those filtering mechanisms, the questions that you guys ask to make sure that there is a fit if there is a franchisee or an interest in becoming a franchisee?
So, it's the same filters that I was alluding to just now. It's all about someone who is, has that right mentality of thinking bigger than just do what they're going to be personally doing day to day. We have a heck of a process, right? We do validation calls with other owners where, and we tell everybody, listen, you're going to meet tons of people on our corporate staff. You're going to meet several people of our existing master franchisees. And as much as you're vetting them, they're vetting you. We have personality trait tests that we do with, I forget what agency that does that, and that helps a lot. On a classic DISC profile, right? You have your achiever, emulator, societal, and belonger. Nothing wrong with belonger societals. My wife's a belonger societal, but the number one performing personality, trait in our system at a master franchise level has that achiever element in either the number one or number two spot. You have to be someone who is extremely driven, and so we're going to test out that. And it's uncomfortable. I haven't had to do it much, but we've had the conversations with people that get pretty deep into the process and say, hey, after meeting with our master franchisees, our existing master franchisees, after looking at your personality test, your financial review, everything like that, we just don't feel like it's going to be a fit. And it's awkward, and you really get on people's nerves in that moment. But at the same time, you have to guard the brand. You have to make sure it's a culture fit. You have to make sure you're going to tee someone up to be extremely successful. And if you have a bunch of doubts about a particular person, better to just wait and versus pull the trigger. And now you have a territory owner who's not a good fit, who's not happy. It hurts validation, it hurts culture. I mean, it can get it can downward spiral. And so better to offend someone a little up front and say, I'm sorry, it's not for you, than to deal with all that.
100%. And certainly with the number of units that you guys are at now, there's not a plethora of territory availability out there, but you still do have some, in my opinion, A-tier territories open, which is pretty rare for a brand that is as large as you guys are. How do you all recommend someone who is looking, or maybe outside of where they're currently at, because there's possibly already a franchise owner, like what, if any, pivot options do they have the capability to scale to a neighboring territory, things like that?
So that's actually extremely common in our model. During COVID, right, there wasn't a lot of people buying new franchises just because a lot of people didn't want to get outdoors, and get to their office or anything, right? And but we had, I think a lot of our, several of our top performing master franchisees during that period saw the opportunity and said, wait a minute, I need to get some more land. I think that year, I think we sold one master franchise in 2020, and it was, and I remember because we were in talks with him before COVID occurred, but then we had, I want to say it was like 7 master franchisees that bought neighboring territories to continue expanding because they realized the size of the opportunity, especially at that point when things were getting a little hectic out there. It's extremely common for people to. It's extremely common for a new person to come in and want way more. Have a stomach. What is it? Eyes bigger than their stomach. And we kind of slow them down and say, listen, let's get your feet wet. There'll be land there, so to speak, in a year or two. Let's see how you can get everything going. But extremely common for people to, want to expand and ultimately expand into multiple territories.
I love that. Achievers, take note. We got some capabilities and some A-tier territory still available. Give us a call. So like kind of pivoting and looking forward thinking now. What's the long-term vision? I know it's a family legacy, but you're now really a market leader in reference to this. So what's the future look like for Anago?
So, I think we're just on a crazy growth path right now. I was in 2021, we were doing, 60 something million in system-wide revenue. And I issued, the long story short is I worked with our team and we issued what I called the $100 million challenge. I said, I want to be a $100 million brand within 2 years. And we did it in 19 months. And then, maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. So then I go, well, now I want to be a $300 million brand, and I want to do it by the end of 2028. So right now we are in the middle of what we're calling Vision 2028, and that is to get to 300 million in system-wide sales. With only three years left to do it, but we're a little more than halfway there. We should be able to pull it off if we keep going, kind of breakneck speed. But it means, it's major investments in our tech, major investments in education and training for master franchisees on the sales and marketing side, investments in the unit franchisees, and ensuring any acquired customers are kept, and there's limited attrition, and they're able to keep do that all very profitably. with some labor headwinds and all that. But we have, it's a multi-pronged approach. We actually just came out with a national accounts department just a couple of years ago. That's doing phenomenally well. I want to say they were able to put out just this past year over $250 million worth of proposals. So it's going, you have to fire on all cylinders. I think, we're going to get real tight by 2028, but I think we might pull it off.
I have nothing but confidence based on y'all's trajectory that you're going to achieve and probably surpass that goal. So kudos for you for continuing to raise the bar as the leader of the organization. Just shout out for that. Kind of, if you don't mind, giving some tactical advice to emerging founders. What do you think is the biggest mistake that a founder makes when they're trying to start to scale through a franchise?
The biggest mistake I made was I guess in thinking about, like, as you grow in a traditional career, right? You get to you start as an employee, then you become a manager, and then maybe a director or a VP, and you climb the ranks, and you get more and more direct reports, and power sort of consolidates underneath you. And the reason it all does that is because the way you do things and the way you think about things works well. The interesting thing is that when you become the business owner or the CEO, and you're adding that scale, you almost have to think about it and kind of unlearn that, right? And it's now all of a sudden it's like, no, I have to push the power and the decision making down and deliberately empower my people to be the ones who make the decisions, who occasionally fumble the ball, but let's make sure we recap on everything and make sure you understand why that happened. And for me, I would say it took me. My wife will say I'm a control freak. Whatever. What does she know? But maybe I am. And so for me, it took me a very long time to learn that lesson and let go of the reins and deliberately put the reins in, find people that are smarter than me, hire them for specific roles, and let them do their thing, and just be more of the industry sage of, let me give you my insight on this, let me give you my 2 cents. Here's some areas that you want to, some thorns you might want to look out for, but otherwise let me empower you to do your thing. That's been, I wish I would have done that, 10 years ago instead of like 5, maybe 15 years ago if I could have, right?
Yeah. I love that. That is a fantastic. Flip the script is kind of the synopsis of what I heard you say there. You have to reverse engineer your thinking to understand you got to do it through people versus doing it through yourself. So I love that. Absolutely love that. So you kind of said if you could go backwards, maybe even 15 years ago, some of the stuff that you might do differently. But if you had the opportunity to rebuild Anago from scratch today, would there be anything that you would have done differently?
Man, there's 100 things. I hate playing, what if, just because it's, there's 100 little things, but if I was going to try to summarize it down, I would have invested more in being a brand sooner, right? It wasn't slap a logo, slap a logo on it and you're Anago too. I wish I would have understood more of what, frankly, we do now, where it's, full playbooks, tech stacks, faster capability of scaling because of all of that. I wish I would have known that and known that from go versus sort of learning about franchising, because I had never been in franchising before Anago. So I'm, learning all of that, kind of, it definitely felt like, jumping out of a plane and trying to build a parachute on the way down sometimes. And now I know that, and I would have invested in that way sooner, way more aggressively. And then, and had something that was extremely repeatable, like I said, 15 years ago.
This has been fantastic. Adam, this was like master level insight on an empire building brand. Excuse me, I can't even talk. You got me so excited about all this. You've shown what it looks like to build a recurring revenue, predictable systems, strong tech stack, owner independence, the exact traits that a lot of buyers are out there fighting for. So to our listeners, if you are stuck in the hustle mode and want to own a scalable, sellable franchise brand, rewind this episode, take some notes and utilize it, leverage it, and let's find a way for you to take part in the growth venture that is Anago Cleaning Systems. Adam, thank you so much for being on. I sincerely appreciate your time.
My pleasure, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Thank you, everybody. Let's go build strategically. Appreciate you all.